So before you actually start building a dashboard, it can be useful to do some planning. The reality is a lot of us won't just kind of whip a dashboard out and be perfect at the beginning. So in this video, we're going to try to help you get comfortable with planning your dashboard by answering 3 specific questions: who, what, and how. So I'm going to actually go through these questions using an example of a dashboard that I've been asked to build, which is a dashboard for our investors so that they can keep up to date with our progress at Lightdash. Now, before I go ahead and start building this dashboard, I want to be able to answer 3 questions. And the first question here is who, or who is this dashboard for? Specifically, I want to know, do these people already know what I'm talking about? Or are they missing some specific context that actually is really important for them to understand what I'm trying to say in my dashboard? So do I need to add more context to my dashboard to help make my point here? Now, in our investor example, our investors are our audience. And these are people who are really likely to know acronyms like weekly active users, but it's less likely that they'll know how we define these internally. So we'll need to add some context around our internal definitions for these metrics. So here I've added some examples of the definitions that I would add in a text box in my dashboard so that our investors would be able to read this information and understand what we're talking about. So things like weekly active users, or what's an activated user, or how do I define our community? So the action for this question is that whenever you're thinking about who your dashboard is for, you want to make sure that you think about the context that your audience is going to need to really get the information that you're trying to show them. Now, our second question is, what is this dashboard trying to accomplish? So we have 2 things that we're thinking about here. The first one is, do we want our audience to take an action, or do we want them to leave the dashboard knowing something that they didn't know before? And once we've figured that out, then we can ask ourselves, what information do they actually need to take that action or to be informed? So we're really thinking about what is the story that we're trying to tell and what points do we need to make to get the story across to our audience. So again, in our investor dashboard example, we don't want them to take any actions. Instead, we want to give them the information that they need to actually understand how our company is performing. So a really easy way to do this is to add this front and center in our dashboard. So within a description, I've written a purpose of this dashboard, which is that it's meant to give investors an overview of our company's performance. And then I've talked specifically about the kind of overview that it's going to give. So it's going to give details about growth, retention, and customer unit economics. So immediately my audience knows the purpose of this dashboard and what they're meant to be walking away with. Now, the other thing that I want to be thinking about in this what question is, what do I actually want to put in this dashboard? So this is where I'll start writing an outline of the questions that I want answered in the tiles of my dashboard. And I'll start thinking a bit more about the story that I'm trying to tell and what points I need to make to get it across to my audience. So here you can see I've thought a bit about growth, I've thought a bit about retention, and I've thought a bit about customer unit economics. Now, the actions for this what is, we want to make sure that we write out a clear summary of our dashboard's purpose and add this to our dashboard so that users come in and they immediately know the context of what they're trying to get from this dashboard. The second thing is to write an outline of questions that you want answered in your tiles. So this is where you start thinking a bit more about the story that you're trying to tell and what points you actually need to make to get across that story to your audience. Now, the last question is how. So how can I actually build this dashboard? And this is where data starts coming in. So the 2 questions that I ask myself here are, what data do I actually have and how can I use this data to make my point? The other things you want to start thinking about is, do I have access to this data? Do these metrics and dimensions already exist that I'm going to need? So with our investor example, what I've done is I've actually linked all of the data sets that I have related to the kind of questions that I want answered in my dashboard. And then from there, I can start thinking about whether or not I actually have that data available to me and which things I'm going to need to build versus which things are just never going to be available. So the actions for this question are to match our data sets to the actual questions that we want answered, and then also start thinking about which metrics and dimensions I'll use to make my points, and figuring out whether or not these already exist, and if they don't, do I need to build some new ones? And those are the who, what, and how of building great dashboards. So who is this dashboard for? What is this dashboard trying to accomplish? And how can I build this dashboard? These are the 3 questions that you should have answered before you even start building your dashboard so that you're set up for success.